She left me at the terminal like discarded luggage. Not even a kiss on the cheek. Not a glance back. Just the cold click of her heels fading against the airport tiles as I sat in the wheelchair she insisted I used. "It's for your safety, Mom," she'd said, fastening the lap belt like I was some confused patient. Then she walked away before I could ask why the airline agent never came. Before I could say the name I had held on to for 78 years, my own. "My name is Margaret Lee. I'm 78 years old, and I taught elementary school for 43 of those years. I raised 2 children. I paid off my mortgage. I buried my husband. I hosted Thanksgiving dinners, baked cherry pies from scratch, donated to libraries, and read bedtime stories until my voice gave out. And this morning, my eldest daughter left me in a wheelchair at gate 32, under the pretense of a delayed flight to Arizona. There was no flight. She didn't even book the ticket. Instead, she walked me to the check-in counter with a fake itinerary and handed me off to a private transportation service dressed in Delta uniforms. They wheeled me right out of Terminal B, not to a plane, but to a black van with tinted windows. I saw the logo only once as I was lifted inside. Silver Pines Retirement Living. That's when I understood. This wasn't a trip. This was a disposal. Rachel, my daughter, had arranged everything down to the air of gentle necessity. The careful way she touched my shoulder and called me Mom, like it still meant something. She always was the organized one. Efficient, practical, successful. She makes 6 figures consulting for some wellness company that preaches gratitude and boundaries. Boundaries, apparently, include disappearing your own mother. The van driver smiled at me like I was in on some surprise party. I sat frozen, gripping my purse like it might save me. Inside was my compact mirror, the one with the tiny clasp and my initials etched on the back. I had slipped it in just before we left the house. Something told me to. I didn't scream. I didn't ask questions. Instead, I stared straight ahead as the retirement facility came into view. Its pristine hedges and glossy brochures masking what it truly was, a holding pen, a place where inconvenient mothers go to forget they once mattered. I had always believed that being needed was the reward for a life spent giving. I learned that lesson at my kitchen table, grading papers late into the night while my kids slept. I told myself I was building a future they would never question. But that morning, as I was rolled past strangers in cardigans playing cards under fluorescent lights, I realized something far colder. They don't want what you gave. They only want what you have left. I was checked in like luggage. Again, a cheerful woman in scrubs asked if I preferred oatmeal or eggs in the morning. She handed me a welcome packet that listed my transition coach and personalized care plan. My room smelled like lavender and bleach. The bed had rails. I asked to call my daughter. "We recommend a quiet adjustment period," the nurse said, smiling too long. 90 days. It helps reduce confusion. Confusion? Let me be clear. I may be 78, but my mind is sharp. I still balance my checkbook. I do crossword puzzles in ink. I know the birth dates of every student I ever taught in 1992. What I didn't know, what no one tells you, is that even the sharpest minds can be sidelined by paperwork and pretense. Rachel had planned this meticulously because she knew I would never agree. And so she engineered a story. A delayed flight, a caring daughter, a brief stay. All lies, all smooth. I sat on the bed for a long time, thinking, not weeping, because something about the way she avoided my eyes that morning had told me everything. Something about the way she had fastened the wheelchair belt, not gentle, not cruel, just ... final ... She thought I wouldn't notice, but I saw the paperwork in her bag, a folder with my name on it. I saw the number and account I didn't recognize. I saw a signature that looked like mine, but wasn't, not exactly. I may have been moved without warning, but I wasn't powerless, and I hadn't forgotten. Not my name, not my daughter's first lie, and not the camera inside. The old pearl necklace I still wore around my neck. I hadn't planned to use it. It was a gift from my husband, fitted years ago as a clever novelty during a tech summer camp he had attended. He thought it would be fun to film family dinners, moments in the garden, but it still worked, and it still recorded. That morning, as Rachel wheeled me through the terminal, I had whispered into it, just one word: remember. I didn't know then what I was preparing for, but something in me, the teacher, the mother, the woman who had lived through recess duty and cancer and the loss of love, knew that this wasn't the end of my story. It was the pop quiz no one thought I could pass, and I would, even if it meant rewriting the lesson plan from scratch. The air outside smelled different. Maybe it was the scent of a world that had already decided to forget me. After that humiliating ride from the airport to the so-called nursing home, I did what I was told. I stayed quiet, observed. I watched every nurse's face, memorized routines, filed every sound away like I used to file spelling tests. A teacher never forgets how to watch people. On the 10th day, I requested a visit home, not with tears, not with begging. I simply looked the facility director in the eye and said, I left something important in my house. Rachel had signed a document barring visitors, calls, and outside contact for 90 days, claiming it was best for my adjustment, but she'd underestimated something, my ability to play along. I nodded and smiled, ate the flavorless meals, and pretended to nap when nurses checked on me. Then, I found Linda. Linda wasn't like the others. Her eyes didn't dart away when mine held too long. She didn't speak in that high-pitched baby tone people use for the elderly. She listened. When I asked for a ride to my house, not to leave, just to retrieve a personal item, she paused for a long time. Then she said, I can arrange 20 minutes. The drive was quiet. As we pulled onto Willow Street, I braced myself to see the rose bushes I planted with Arthur 50 years ago. But it wasn't the roses that hit me, it was the mailbox. The nameplate had been changed. No more Lee. I got out slowly, my legs trembling not from age, but fury. The key I carried didn't fit the front door. Linda shifted awkwardly, unsure whether to help or wait. I rang the doorbell. A young couple answered. They looked surprised, but not alarmed. I asked, Is this 200 for Willow Street? They nodded. Yes, we moved in 6 months ago. Moved in, I said. The woman looked concerned. Ma, single quotes, am, ... Are you okay? This house was sold a while ago. The previous owners were a David and Rachel Harrow. Linda gently took my arm. Let's go back, Margaret. I shook her off. No, I need the deed, the papers, something. The young man stepped out with a file folder. He handed me a copy of the sale document. My name wasn't on it. Only David Harrow's signature. Transfer of ownership. Notarized. Almost 2 years ago, I took the paper in my hands, my fingers curled tight around the edge. How could this be? I had lived in that house for over 4 decades. Every nail, every creak in the wood floor was part of me. Do you remember signing anything, Margaret? Linda asked gently on the ride back. I searched my memory. The last time Rachel visited with David, they'd brought papers. Something about taxes. Estate planning. She'd said, just routine, helps if anything ever happens. I had signed. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a systematic erasure. They hadn't just taken my house. They'd scrubbed my existence from it. Back in the facility, I sat with that paper, folded and unfolded it, traced the signature that wasn't mine. My hand was shaky from time to time, but I never signed like that. And I never signed anything giving away my house. Linda returned the next day, quietly. She brought a file. I did some digging. I hope you don't mind. Inside, a power of attorney form, signed by me, notarized, dated 18 months ago, but I hadn't been in that bank on that date. I had been in the hospital with pneumonia. I stared at the page. That signature. The loops were wrong. The slant was off. Someone had forged it. Probably David. Maybe even Rachel. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there. Because it wasn't just a house. It was every birthday Arthur and I hosted. Every Thanksgiving with 2 dry turkey. Every wallpaper change. Every corner where a child scraped a knee. They had stripped me of it like stripping paint off old wood. Efficient, silent. I requested to make a call. Rachel didn't answer. I left a voicemail. I visited the house today. Thank you for changing the locks. It made things clearer. No reply. Not even a text. 3 days later, a legal envelope arrived addressed to me. Inside, confirmation that I was now a full-time ward of Rachel Harrow, with medical and financial authority granted to her and her husband. Again. Signed. Again. Not in my hand. I stared at the words. Legalese, meant to confuse and pacify. Words that dressed up theft in the clothes of care. Linda knocked. Stood in the doorway, unsure. I held up the paper. It seems I don't even own my decisions anymore. She didn't reply. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed every moment I'd ever said yes to Rachel. Every time I'd told myself she was just busy, just tired, just practical. That she loved differently. And yet, here I was, dispossessed, isolated, and legally powerless. But there was something Rachel hadn't counted on: my memory. I had taught hundreds of children, corrected thousands of essays, names, faces, patterns. They stayed with me. I remembered that David had asked strange questions about my bank accounts one afternoon, years ago. I remembered Rachel insisting I use a specific notary. I remembered how she'd always cut calls short when I mentioned reviewing my will. They were careless in their confidence, so I started writing names, dates, things she said, things I never would have agreed to. I hid the list under my mattress, because no matter how many documents they forged, the truth was still with me. I was old, but I was not gone, and I was not done. I didn't expect help when I first called Kyle, but when he arrived at the facility, his face wasn't angry. It was shocked, ashamed. He didn't speak at first, just sat beside me at the small circular table in the common room. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed quietly. "I found something," he whispered, sliding an envelope over. The paper was thin, sterile, a bank envelope. Inside, a packet of documents. I pulled them out, scanning the headings: durable power of attorney, medical and legal decisions. Margaret Lee gives Rachel Harrow, notarized and dated 6 months ago. I glanced at the signature. The loops were uneven. The tail flicked too sharply upward. I had perfect penmanship. I could spot a forgery blindfolded. "I never signed that." Kyle swallowed. He ran a shaky hand through his hair. "She told me it was a temporary power of attorney when you had that procedure, that cataract surgery. You agreed." He hesitated. "I didn't know it meant everything. A calculated deceit. She had manipulated me while I was under anesthesia, under other people's care." He traced a finger across the printed words, as though trying to erase them. "She made it medical, but it includes finances, legal. You gave her control over everything." I didn't flinch. I folded the documents, laid them on the table. In the silence, I felt the shift. Not in my heart, but in the surface of the world. Some mornings are ordinary. Some mornings change your life. This was one of those. Rachel wasn't just taking my house, she was taking my authority. Reinvention after reinvention, word by word, document by document. I closed my eyes. Images drifted. My first class, parents applauding test scores, a screaming toddler grabbing my hand during recess duty. I was a teacher, not a subject. Kyle leaned closer. "Mom, I'm sorry. I thought you were being difficult, that you were slipping. I didn't know. I didn't want to ask." I nodded, exhaling slowly. "You wanted peace. She offered you a share. You took it." He winced. I reached out, touched his hand lightly. "You didn't hurt me." "She did, but I'm still here." He pulled away, embarrassed or relieved. "I didn't know which. I want to fix this," he said. I considered the quiet resolve in his eyes. I could use his loyalty, if it was real. That afternoon, I walked slowly back to my room, carrying the paperwork. Linda was outside, wiping down tables. I told her, Rachel lied. She didn't tell me what that document meant. I held the papers between us. She nodded, solemn. "I know. I've seen the same kind of thing before." We arranged a plan. She began copying internal memos, voicemails, logs. She promised discretion. That night, I re-examined every piece of paper I had. Everything lined up under the mattress. Notes, small receipts, sundry records. I added Kyle's testimony to the list. The next morning, I let Rachel visit me under supervision. She entered with exaggerated sympathy. She touched the booklet of forms I was reading. "Still going through hospital filings. I see." "I didn't look up, Mom. I wanted those signed forms to cover legal stuff," she continued. "You know, in case you ever wanted a say." Her voice dripped with strain. I closed the booklet, smiled faintly. "I think I always had a say. I just didn't know how to speak loud enough." Her eyes narrowed. She thought I was losing it, that I was slipping back into confusion. But I wasn't. I was cataloging every phrase, every hesitation, every facade of concern. Rachel left early. David never showed. That night, lying awake, I thought of the mirror in my purse. The one with my initials. I flipped it open. Reflection, paper, light. They'd taken my legal power. They hadn't taken my WATCHFULNESS. The next day, Kyle returned. He looked more resolved. "I found something in the files," he said, handing me another stack. "A medical request, memory evaluation, signed by you, from a year ago." I recognized the tiny hospital stamp. The date, that was the day Rachel had dragged me to see the neurologist, claiming I'd forgotten routine names, minor dates. I had felt embarrassed then. I had blamed age. Till today. I flipped the document and saw recommendation. Continued family oversight due to mild cognitive decline. Kyle's voice was hoarse. They submitted it to justify full control. I dabbed a tear, pathetic sign of rage. That night, I stood in front of the mirror. My reflection looked steady, older, but exact. I leaned close, whispering into that discreet camera hidden in the clasp of my pearl necklace, turning on the recording. Just enough. 2 words. Remember this, because in that mirror I saw not a burden, but a woman who understood abuse was never physical, only it was legal, it was emotional, and often, it was clever. I loaded the final documents into an envelope. My handwriting, shaky but certain, addressed it to Kyle. Hold this, then to Linda. Keep safe. I tucked it all into my bag. Rachel might think she had stolen everything. She thought I was fading, fragile, powerless, but she'd overlooked something older than her manipulation, my memory, and my will. I lay in the bed that night, mattress creaking under the weight of my history, and felt something others call fear, but I call fuel, because the next chapter would not be silence, it would be testimony, and I was still teaching. Kyle came again, a week later, not with flowers or apologies, but with a manila folder and a worried crease between his brows. We sat in the corner of the facility's library, between dusty encyclopedias and laminated jigsaw puzzles. I shouldn't have these, he said, voice low, but I think you need to see them. I opened the folder. Inside were 5 printed pages and a sticky note with 2 words. Don't react. The heading on the first sheet made my stomach tighten. Cognitive assessment request, Margaret Lead, 14 months ago. Below, in Rachel's handwriting, patient displays signs of early-stage cognitive deterioration, history of forgetfulness, confusion with dates, excessive emotional recall. My signature appeared at the bottom, except I had never seen this document before. Kyle tapped the 3rd page. This was submitted to the state, along with your supposed decline certificate. They were building a profile, making you legally less than yourself. I stared at it. Each sentence landed like a shove. I remember that week, I said. Rachel took me to a doctor's office, told me it was routine. I felt odd about it, but she spoke to the nurse alone. They used it as backup, just in case you ever fought back legally. So even my moments of compliance had been weaponized. Kyle leaned back, uncomfortable. There's more. He pulled out a yellowed clipping, an old photograph of me accepting a plaque state. Educator of the Year, 1988. A framed copy used to hang in the hallway of my home. Rachel had always hated it. I didn't know this, he said. She told David you left her alone during that ceremony, that you missed her school play. I exhaled. The memory was faint. Rachel in 3rd grade, me in a conference room full of suits and flashing cameras. I couldn't recall her asking me to come, but it didn't matter. That's what she remembered. Not the dinners, not the drives, not the homework help, but the one time I wasn't there. They called it abandonment. Kyle added quietly. She's using it as justification. Says you always cared more about students than your own family. That lie hurt more than the signature forgery. I folded the paper. So, this is revenge, not just greed. Kyle nodded. She thinks it's justice. I didn't respond. I couldn't not. Then the next morning, Linda slipped into my room during morning rounds. She checked my vitals, then lingered. Word is, Rachel signed a 90-day no-contact order when you were admitted, she said. Said you needed rest. I blinked. What does that mean? No phone calls, no visitors, not on the list, mail screened. You've been legally isolated, so that's why no one answered my letters. Why my old neighbor never replied. Why Kyle looked stunned when I called him last week. She lowered her voice. I can't say more. But I've seen this before. A slow kind of erasure. Linda stood and adjusted my blankets as she left. She murmured, you're not the first, but you might be the first to fight it properly. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the tiny desk in my room, going over every scrap of my own handwriting I still had. I made a list, dates, people, passwords, my history, my facts, the texture of my truth. The facility staff thought I was organizing old memories. I was preparing a defense. The next day, Rachel visited again. She brought a plant and a stiff smile. How are you, Mom? I nodded. Tired, mostly. Adjusting though, right? It's a good facility. I smiled faintly. They say, it's good. She looked relieved, sat down. I know it's hard, but Kyle and we really think this is best. You need peace. No more stress. No more phone calls. No more outside letters, I said, watching her closely. She hesitated. For your health. I let the silence linger. Then, did you get my message last week? Her brows furrowed. Which one? The one I left with Linda, about the assessment papers, the ones you filed. Rachel's posture stiffened. You're confused again. Maybe. I leaned forward, but confused people don't remember exact appointment dates, or missing photo frames, or where they left their gavel from 30 years ago. She blinked. What gavel? I smiled. Exactly. She stood quickly. I'll come back next week, get some rest. Her retreat was sudden. That meant she was afraid. 3 days later, Kyle returned. He looked steadier. His guilt had turned into resolve. I spoke to an attorney, he said. Off the court, she says, if we can prove duress or deception, the power of attorney can be revoked, but we need evidence. I slid the necklace from under my collar. Look closely, I said. He leaned in. The small pearl clasp was unassuming. Mom, what is that? A micro-recorder. Motionally triggered. Kyle stared. It caught Rachel, talking about how I was a burden, how I wouldn't notice if the funds were redirected. He nodded slowly. We'll need more. Bank statements, signatures to compare timelines. I held up the old Gavalese, the one from when I supervised the student court team. I'd kept it in my sock drawer, always. And it wasn't where Rachel thought it was. I have records. Linda's helping. You get the legal support. We do this quietly. He smiled for the first time. Are you ready? I looked him dead in the eye. She thought I was sleeping, but I was building a case. He stood, holding the folder close. I'm with you. All the way. As he left, I turned to the mirror again. It wasn't vanity. It was positioning. That clasp blinked once recording resumed. Step 2, I whispered. Begin. They told me it was temporary. Just a brief adjustment period. Mrs. Lee, you'll feel at home in no time. But homes don't take your name off. The mailbox homes have windows that open, phones that ring, clocks that tick. This place had none of that, just silence and walls, padded with courtesy. On the 5th morning, I asked a young nurse, barely older than the students I once taught, if I could call my son. She smiled, that same tight, polite smile. I'm sorry, Mrs. Lee. There's a no-contact restriction for the initial 90 days. It's standard, 90 days. I didn't agree to that. She hesitated. Your daughter signed it on your behalf. It's in your file. I stared at her. My daughter. My blood. My betrayer. Later that night, when the halls settled and the overhead lights dimmed, I searched the drawers of my nightstand. No purse, no phone, not even the emergency card I always kept tucked between my ID and Medicare card. Gone. Even the photo album I carried everywhere. In its place was a laminated booklet with bright colors and careful fonts titled Resident Orientation Guide. It told me what I could not do. No outside calls without family approval. No visitors unless pre-cleared. No movement outside designated areas. It didn't feel like rehabilitation. It felt like incarceration. She came in the next day. Her name tag read Linda. No perfume. No heavy makeup. Hair tied back like she had real work to do. She didn't ask fake questions like the others. Mind if I check your vitals, Mrs. Lee? I didn't answer. I watched her hands, steady and clean. She wrapped the cuff around my arm and leaned in. You were a teacher once, right? 5th grade Pennsylvania. I didn't nod, didn't speak, just waited. She smiled faintly. My aunt used to talk about her. Teacher, said she changed her life. Margaret Lee. I blinked. Diane Laker. That's her. Said you stayed after school 2 months to help her learn cursive. I whispered, she loved owls. Linda laughed. Still does. Has one tattooed on her shoulder. I smiled for the first time in days. Then her voice dropped lower. That's why I read your chart. My smile vanished. She glanced at the door, then back. To me, I shouldn't be telling you this, but something's off. You're lucid. You're sharp. But your file says you're deteriorating cognitively. Mild to moderate decline, unable to handle legal decisions. I said nothing, just listened. Your daughter authorized the 90-day clause, no contact. Even medical staff must request clearance for anything outside routine checks. They're monitoring you closely. She thinks you won't remember or won't fight. But I could see it in your eyes. You're still here. That night, I faked a dizzy spell during dinner. I'd taught drama 25 years. I knew how to fall. Linda rushed to me, steady hands, concerned voice. And as she wheeled me past the front desk, she slipped a folded napkin into my sleeve. Back in my room, I unfolded it slowly. Security logs wiped every Sunday, 3 a.m. Trash isn't monitored. 2. Staff members sympathetic. I'm 1. 2 nights later, she returned with her cart during the late shift. No small talk, no smile, just a plastic tray with a napkin. Underneath, a miniature voice recorder and a copy of an itemized billing statement. She tapped the paper. This was billed to your name. $5,000 for cognitive wellness coaching. But look, same day, you were at urgent care for a sprained ankle. You weren't even here. I looked at the billing codes, the falsified dates, the initials of staff I'd never met. Rachel's funneling your money through padded services. This place gets a cut. They let her. That's why no one's asking questions. They're profiting off your silence. That week, I started watching. I charted the halls, memorized shift rotations, staff names, who took long breaks and who never smiled. I drew maps on the back of my menu cards, noted where cameras blinked and where they didn't, when the security guard took his smoke break, how long the front desk was left unattended during Sunday services. Linda helped where she could. Always careful, always subtle. Then she brought me something that didn't belong in a place like this. My compact mirror. I gasped when I saw it. Found it buried at the bottom of the communal laundry cart, she whispered. I opened it. Tucked inside was a yellowing sheet of paper, carefully folded my first appointment letter as a teacher. Dated 1972. I hadn't seen it in decades. I thought it was gone forever. Rachel hadn't thrown it away. She'd buried it, like she tried to bury me. By the end of the 3rd week, I had a plan. I asked Linda to help me record a statement. She placed the recorder in front of me, and I spoke clearly. My name is Margaret Lee. I am 78 years old. I am of sound mind. I have not voluntarily signed any document surrendering my rights, property, or access to family. If this recording is found following my death or prolonged absence, consider it a declaration of duress. I paused. And Rachel, I remember everything. Linda's hands trembled as she turned the recorder off. One afternoon, I saw Kyle. Or rather, I saw him try to visit. From my window, I watched him at the front desk, confused, animated, insistent. The receptionist shook her head. He grew more agitated. Then security escorted him out. I pressed my hand to the glass. He had come. And he had been turned away. That night, Linda slipped me another message. Your son tried to visit. Denied access. Left angry. My heart split open. Not because I missed him, but because if Kyle, my quiet, uncertain boy, was starting to question Rachel's story, then perhaps this house of cards was beginning to tremble. I wasn't alone anymore. I had my memory. I had my name. And I was done being erased. They say routine numbs the edges of grief. Wake up. Smile at the nurse. Chew the toast. Listen to the television that's never turned off. Smile again. Breathe like you're grateful for the air. I played the part well. A quiet old woman, cooperative, accepting. But every smile I gave was inventoried. Every silence, a ledger. Linda came during her evening shift. She didn't speak, didn't meet my eyes, just handed me a folded towel. Inside was a thin flash drive. She didn't wait for thanks, just moved on, like always. Later, that night, after lights out, I pried open the back of the small TV in the corner. It took me 20 minutes with the blunt tip of a spoon and shaking hands, but I got it open. The port worked, the screen flickered, then opened into a document list that didn't belong on any patient TV. There were receipts, dozens of them, transfers, invoices, altered donation records. I scrolled carefully. The scholarship fund bearing my name, the Margaret Lee Opportunity Grant, was dry. Emptied 3 months ago. The last withdrawals were to a series of personal expense accounts under initials I recognized, R.L. Rachel Lee, and worse. A payment marked consulting services to D.H. David Harris, my son-in-law, my accountant. The grant had been my one legacy. I'd started it 15 years ago, funded with the pension I'd scrimped from, and had awarded it to over 50 students, future nurses, teachers, artists, all of it gone. Replaced by a single itemized transaction note, reabsorbed due to donor incapacity. I was the donor, and I was never asked, never informed, just erased, declared unfit, unknowing, invalid, my signature, duplicated in sharp ink that wasn't mine, my will, rewritten without a whisper. That morning, I didn't eat. Linda noticed but said nothing. She handed me my tea with a whisper. Thursday, records office. You'll have 15 minutes. I didn't ask how. I didn't need to. She knew. She'd made the arrangement. Thursday arrived like a dare. I kept my hands steady during breakfast. Wore the same cardigan I'd worn for decades, navy blue, one pocket mended 3 times. I needed to be invisible, harmless. Harmlessness had become my disguise. Linda approached during hallway exercises. Records room, she said softly. Mr. Jenkins' counsel. Use his slot. She slipped a keycard into my hand, cold plastic against my palm. Then she turned and walked away. The door opened with a single beep. No one followed. I moved fast. Decades of teaching taught me the art of reading under pressure. I found the personnel file first. My file. Margaret Lee, age 78. Status, non-communicative, upon intake. Mild cognitive impairment. No contact authorization. Legal proxy. Rachel Lee. Then the notes. Psychological assessment by Dr. J. Mercer, someone I'd never met. Diagnosis, sundowning behavior. Emotional instability. Inconsistent. Memory recall. I laughed, quietly, bitterly. I had organized every Thanksgiving dinner for 30 years and remembered every face, every allergy, every argument. I had been the one to remind Kyle of his job interviews, Rachel of her prenatal appointments, David of tax deadlines. Yet here, I was unstable. I scanned the rest of the folder. The psychologist's license number, fake, expired. A forged credentials stamped into my legal chain. Then I saw another document. One I hadn't expected. A reassignment clause, it stated. In the event of donor cognitive regression, all charitable assets will revert to the nearest legal proxy, per agreement 1-2A, signed with my name. But it wasn't my signature. It was the same one I'd seen used on the property deed. The same slope on the L, the same misplaced dot over the I. The printer in the room was old, slow, but functional. I printed 4 pages, folded them small, slipped them into the mended pocket of my cardigan. Then, I returned to group therapy with a smile. That evening, Rachel called the facility. I overheard the receptionist. Yes, she's been calm. No incidents. Yes, still declining. It wasn't even a conversation. Just a script, played weekly, a report of decay. I thought about the last time Rachel had looked at me without calculation, perhaps at Kyle's graduation, or before her wedding, when she'd clutched my hand with shaking fingers. What had changed her? Had it been one moment, or many? 1,000 silent disappointments, or just one sharp betrayal that festered? Linda found me again the next morning. I read what you printed. You're not imagining it. It's a full rewrite of your life. She hesitated. I have someone who can help, a journalist, quiet, careful, but she needs proof it's you, and that you're not under coercion. I nodded. I knew what to do. That night, I retrieved the compact mirror from its hiding place under the mattress. I popped the false bottom and pulled out the yellowed appointment letter, dated 1972. My full name, my handwriting, a state seal, proof of who I was before anyone tried to rename me. We scanned it in the laundry room while the dryers roared. Linda uploaded the document. Then she added the photos I'd taken of the forged files, the donation records, the billing invoices. She included a voice recording of me reading the appointment letter, clear, steady, unbroken. 3 days later, Kyle returned. They didn't let him in. I didn't know he had come until Linda pressed a napkin into my hand. Written inside, he's asking questions now. He threatened legal action. The next morning, Rachel arrived. She hadn't visited since the first week. She walked in like she owned the floor. Designer coat, cold smile. She dismissed Linda with a wave. How are we today? She asked, voice dripping with pretense. I stared at her. Which part of me are you checking on? My health or your investments? Her smile tightened. You're not well, Mom. You haven't been. That's why I'm managing things. It's not personal. It never was, I replied. It was always transactional. She frowned. You're confused again. I'll ask the staff to adjust your medication. You stole my grant fund, I said. Calm, even. That's enough, she snapped. You don't understand how much work I've had to do to keep everything stable. You weren't handling anything. You left it all to fall apart. I left you a legacy. You turned it into a bank account. She stood furious now. You gave up control, Mother. I just signed the papers. You didn't understand. I met her eyes, but I understand now. She stared for a beat, then turned on her heel and left out. Linda entered moments later. It's done, she whispered. The journalist ran the story. Small outlet, local, but it's gaining traction. Your name is back in circulation. I said nothing. I just opened the compact mirror again, looked at my reflection, not because I needed reassurance, but because I wanted to remember the face of the woman who wouldn't disappear. Rachel called the next day, screaming at the front desk. The staff overheard. Threats, demands, accusations. It was recorded. And Kyle came again, this time, with a lawyer. The staff hesitated. But the lawyer had papers, new ones, challenging the medical claims, contesting the power of attorney, requesting an independent evaluation. They let him in. When he saw me, his face crumpled. He dropped to his knees beside the chair. I'm sorry, he whispered. I should have known. I should have questioned it all sooner. I placed a hand on his. You still can. That evening, Linda brought a new folder. Inside, a notarized declaration revoking Rachel's control, a request for independent guardianship review, and a formal request for audit into the financial activities surrounding the Margaret Lee Opportunity Grant. I signed. And for the first time in weeks, I slept without keeping one eye open. The facility's front gate buzzed open at 4 p.m. sharp. Sunlight sliced across the concrete like a blade, pooling into warm gold over the courtyard bricks. I waited on the same bench where they rolled me once a week for fresh air. Linda's shawl covered my shoulders. Underneath, wrapped tight in the fabric's fold, was a manila envelope that felt heavier than stone. Kyle walked in alone. His steps hesitated at the threshold, like someone unsure whether they were welcome in their own past. His face was drawn, sleepless. No Rachel, no David. Just him. He spotted me. We locked eyes. Mom, I didn't stand. Not because I couldn't, but because I needed him to sit first. He did. No hug, no hand extended. Just a long silence that hung between us like smoke. You tried to visit, I said, 3 times. He looked startled. They told me you refused, that you didn't want to see me. I smiled, bitter, unsurprised. They lied. He ran a hand through his hair. Everything feels upside down. I don't know who to believe anymore. You're a grown man, Kyle. You've had decades to learn discernment. He flinched, but didn't deny it. That was something. I placed the envelope on his lap. Before you speak again, read this. He opened it. Inside, 10 pages. Copies of billing statements, falsified medical reports, Rachel's forged signature on a consent to care form. At the bottom, a handwritten annotation, filed with the state attorney, backup copy held by third party. I watched his face change. She used your name, I said. She used David's accounting software to draft the reports. She used my declining handwriting to simulate consent. Kyle's hands gripped the papers tighter. I didn't know it was this deep. You helped her. His head snapped up. You signed off on the psychiatric assessment. His eyes watered. She said it was just for temporary care. To make sure you'd be safe. That you were getting forgetful and it was becoming dangerous. Do I look forgetful? He shook his head quickly. Then why did you believe her? Kyle looked away. Because she always takes charge. Because she made it sound like love, like protection. No, I said. She made it sound convenient. And you let her. Because it was easier than asking hard questions. He didn't argue. The breeze picked up, leaves scattered over the courtyard tiles. Somewhere, a fountain sputtered to life, trying to sound tranquil. I'm sorry, Mom. I let the words sit for a moment. I'm not interested in apologies. His mouth twitched. I'm interested in choices. He swallowed. What do you mean? I leaned forward, voice level. Linda helped me move the remaining funds into a trust. The trustee has discretion over all that trust is now in your name. Kyle blinked. What? It's not a gift. It's a test. He froze. You can use it to rebuild what you broke. Or, you can do what Rachel did, siphon it off, asset by asset, and justify it with excuses about comfort and care. Why would you give me that power? His voice cracked. After everything. Because I need to know what kind of man my son has become. Because I want to believe you're more than her shadow. He bowed his head. Then I added, quietly, and because, if you fail, I'll know how to destroy everything cleanly. He looked up again, startled. I may be 78, but I am still capable of strategy, I said. You and your sister taught me that. The sun shifted. Shadows crawled along the bench. You were a good boy once, I said, softening for the first time. You stood up to a bully in second grade because he took a crayon from a girl in a wheelchair. You told him, you don't get to decide what she needs. Kyle's face crumbled. You knew better then than you do now, I said. He sat in silence for a long time. Then he said, I want to fix it. You can't, I replied, but you can choose not to follow her deeper. He stood, holding the envelope like it might shatter. Do you still wear the necklace? My fingers found the pearls at my throat. Every day, he nodded. She hated that thing, yes, I said, because it wasn't hers to steal. As he turned to leave, I said one last thing. When the time comes, Kyle, don't forget my name. He stopped. Rachel already did. And then he walked out, and I let the silence reclaim the courtyard. That night, Linda brought in a thermos of chamomile tea and 2 paper cups. He came, she said, pouring. He did. How did it go? I reminded him who he was. She handed me a cup. Do you think he'll do the right thing? I think he's drowning in guilt. Is that enough? No, I said. But it's a start. We drank in silence. Then Linda asked, do you want to see something? She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small voice recorder, the one I'd used weeks ago. She pressed play. Rachel's voice, faint but clear. Once she's ruled incompetent, the house goes to me by default. Just say she wandered off again. David already has the form signed. Kyle won't fight if he thinks it's for her good. I stared at the device. We found it wedged under the common room sofa, Linda said. Housekeeping almost tossed it. I looked at her. This is enough. She nodded. Combined with the billing fraud, the forged documents, and the restricted visitation, it's more than enough. Then let's begin. The legal wheels turned slower than I liked, but they turned. 2 days later, I was visited by a woman from the state ombudsman's office. Then a financial investigator. Then a woman in pearls and an overstarched blazer from Adult Protective Services. I answered their questions with perfect memory, backed every word with a printed page. I didn't flinch when Rachel was contacted, didn't blink when David sent a lawyer, didn't waver when a second lawyer called to negotiate, because this time I was ready. They had underestimated the wrong old woman. Linda visited one evening with a single sheet of paper. From your lawyer, she said, handing it to me. I unfolded it. It was Rachel's written response to the summons. Margaret Lee has long suffered from delusions of persecution and has no understanding of her financial limits. Her condition has deteriorated since before the initial care agreement was signed, as confirmed by multiple family witnesses and evaluations. Underneath, in David's handwriting, were the words, motion to dismiss due to incapacity. I handed the paper back. Burn it, I said. Linda looked at me. I don't need it. I know the truth. She nodded and slipped the paper into her coat. Later that night, I opened my compact mirror. There, still folded tight, was the old certificate. Appointment of Margaret Lee, elementary educator, 1968, a lifetime ago. I stared at the reflection next to it. My skin bore lines of time, but my eyes still held fire. They thought I was eroded, but I was forged in the silence. I whispered to no one, you forgot my name, Rachel, but I never forgot yours. And tomorrow, the world would remember mine. Linda came into my room with a look I hadn't seen before. Not pity, not caution, something firm. Urgency. You need to act, she said. Now. She slipped a thin envelope under my blanket. Inside, 2 printed pages and a list of numbers. I scanned them. Bank transactions, account transfers, names I didn't recognize. I thought she was just funneling some bills, Linda whispered. But this ... this is deeper. Shell accounts, some offshores. One is registered under your name but routed through a company in Delaware. My hands trembled. She's laundering your retirement funds. Under your signature. I exhaled slowly. How much is left? Linda hesitated. Not much, maybe a third, at best. Enough to move. She blinked. Move where? Power. Away from her. That night, when the halls quieted and the lights dimmed, I used the compact mirror to catch the reflection of the hallway camera. Linda had marked the blind spot with a dab of whiteout. I waited for the moment the night nurse went for her 3:15 smoke, then wheeled myself toward the records office. Inside, the air smelled like toner and stale carpet. I rummaged through file drawers until I found the one marked Legal Guardianship -2025, my name, printed neatly on a tab. I pulled the folder, heart pounding. Inside, signatures, so many of mine, some familiar, some too neat, too recent. I flipped through, notarized stamps, clauses I didn't recognize, a power of attorney, a living will, a medical directive, all bearing my name, all forged. Back in my room, I opened the drawer under my bed. The recorder Linda gave me, still working. I clicked it on. Rachel forged at least 6 legal documents in my name. Most since January. She had access to my ID, my address, even my old signature cards. She used David's notary stamp. He never worked for the bank. It was faked. The next morning, I asked Linda for one last favor. I need to speak to someone outside. Not family. Not here. A lawyer. She looked nervous. That could trigger alerts. I don't care. She hesitated. Okay, one condition we use. My cousin. Is she licensed? Very. And discreet. Her name was Alina Wu, 43. Steel eyes. Sharp suit. She met me in the rec room, posing as a family liaison consultant. We played checkers as cover. I've seen this before, Alina said under her breath. They put you in here, isolate you, then bleed your assets through overlapping authorizations. Once you're legally declared incapacitated, you can't sue, can't testify. I moved my checker forward. Can you reverse it? Yes, but not loudly. We do it surgically. She handed me a document under the table. This is a limited POA transfer. You'll shift authority from Rachel to a neutral fiduciary, temporarily, that buys us breathing room, not to you. She smiled. No, I don't want your money. I want your win. I signed. Then I pulled out the compact mirror and handed it to her. Inside, I said, is a folded paper, my first teacher appointment, and a micro recorder embedded in the rim. Alina opened it carefully. Her eyes widened. Who's the man speaking here? She asked, after playing a 15-second clip. My son, I said, being manipulated, but not irredeemable. She nodded. We'll use that, too. But the priority is moving your remaining assets somewhere safe. I looked at her squarely. To Kyle, she blinked. Your son, the same one who... Yes, that's a risk. Good, I said. Let's see who he really is. Kyle received the transfer notification at exactly 3:15 p.m. the next day. I know because Linda watched him from the hallway window, pacing in front of the building, staring at his phone. Is he angry? I asked. No, she said. Just... frozen. That night, Kyle didn't call, didn't show up, but 2 days later, an envelope was delivered to my room. No return address. Inside, a single page, Kyle's handwriting. I didn't deserve this second chance. I know that, but I'll carry it right this time. I swear to you, Mom. K. I read the words 3 times, then folded the note into my gown pocket. I didn't need an apology. I needed evidence of change. The staff started treating me differently after the transfer. Fewer smiles, more questions. A nurse tried to accidentally give me a sedative. Linda caught it just in time. They know, she said. Good, I replied. So does the IRS. Alina had filed a quiet inquiry through a financial crimes liaison. Once the offshore funnel was reported, Rachel's tax filings would automatically be flagged. The dominoes were aligned, but it wasn't enough. I needed one last piece. Proof of malice. The opportunity came during Rachel's surprise visit. She walked into my room, unannounced. All polished hair and fake warmth. Hi, Mom. Just came by to see how you're settling in. I stared at her. She smiled. I heard you've been... busy. I said nothing. She looked around the room. No phone. Still, they really take your safety seriously here. She sat, crossed her legs. I hope you understand. I did all this for you. You were getting confused, forgetting things, like how you moved my money, I said flatly. She tilted her head. Excuse me. Or signed a loan in my name. She gave a small laugh. Mom, you're not well. That's why we're here. I reached under the blanket, clicked the recorder. I see. Then maybe we should talk about that medical exam you faked. Her smile cracked. I don't know what you think you're doing, or the grant money you diverted. The foundation audit comes next. She stood abruptly. You don't know anything. You're confused. I stared at her. Then I whispered, "Your father would be ashamed of you." That landed, her face flushed. "He left. You think he was some saint. You worshipped a man who abandoned us, just like you abandoned me for your students, for your awards. You gave your life to everyone but your own family." There it was. I leaned forward, and now, Rachel's voice dropped. "Now I take back what I was owed." Click, the recorder was full. She turned to leave. I smiled. "Oh, Rachel." She stopped. "I remember everything." Alina moved fast. Within 24 hours, the recordings, documents, and financial files were sent in sealed packets to the State Elder Protection Office, the county DA, and a retired Judge Harris, a former colleague of Elena's, but more importantly, a man I once mentored in a summer literacy program 40 years ago. He remembered me, and he still wore the cufflink set I gave him when he passed the bar. His email reply was short: "I'll see it through, with care." A week later, Rachel's accounts were frozen pending investigation. David was served with a subpoena related to forged documents. The facility director was placed on temporary leave. I was moved discreetly into a private home care program under Elena's oversight. The morning I left, Linda hugged me tighter than I expected. "You were never just a resident," she whispered. "You reminded me of my aunt, strong, brilliant, underestimated." "Keep watching," I told her. "There's more coming." In the car, I held the compact mirror on my lap. Beside it, the pearl necklace. Two things they tried to bury, but I'm not so easily erased. The courthouse smelled like polished wood and old air, the kind of place where everything had weight, words, glances, even silence. I sat still on the front bench. My necklace, a simple string of pearls, rested quietly above my collarbone. It looked unremarkable. That was intentional. Across the room, Rachel sat stiff in her navy blazer. David was beside her, avoiding eye contact. No lawyers next to them yet. Kyle stood behind me, not beside his sister. Judge Harris entered. No gavel, just a sharp nod. His eyes paused on me for a second, one moment of quiet recognition, then dropped to the file in front of him. Docket 3271, matter of alleged elder financial abuse, forgery, and unauthorized asset transfer. He adjusted his glasses. "We'll begin." Linda had delivered everything: the audio from my necklace, the falsified signatures, the paper trail Rachel never thought anyone would trace, base, even the digital backups from the care facility proving she authorized the 90-day isolation. Despite full awareness I was of sound mind, I had stayed quiet. I let the evidence speak for me. David's voice broke first. "I didn't know what she was doing. Not all of it. I just thought she said it was what her mother wanted." "Did you benefit financially?" Judge Harris asked. David looked down. "Yes." Rachel didn't speak. "Not yet. They called me to testify." I walked slowly to the stand. No cane, no chair. Just my name, my age, my occupation. Margaret Lee, 78, retired teacher. And then, my statement. I taught children for 41 years. I told them how to look for meaning, not just in stories, but in people. Somehow, I failed to do that at home. I didn't cry. I didn't dramatize. I spoke like I was reading from a paper I'd graded too many times. There were no bruises. There was no shouting. Just a slow erasure. One form at a time. I looked briefly at Rachel, then past her. Abuse doesn't always hurt your body. Sometimes it convinces the world you don't exist. I ended with a line I hadn't written down, hadn't rehearsed, and I'm here, Your Honor, because I refused to be deleted. The evidence was clear. The account statements, the doctor's revised report that retracted the claim of cognitive decline, the missing scholarship fund money rerouted through David's consulting firm. Rachel tried to argue context. She was becoming unstable. She called me at night, accusing me of theft. She was confused. The judge raised a hand. "Ms. Lawson." Was this before or after the facility diagnosed her as lucid and functioning without signs of dementia? Rachel didn't answer. She was bitter, angry. She mumbled. "I wonder why," Harris replied dryly. The ruling didn't take long. Based on the presented evidence, this court finds Rachel Lawson and David Lawson guilty of financial exploitation, elder coercion, and falsification of legal documents. Restitution is ordered. Civil penalties will apply. Further criminal proceedings are recommended. No gavel slam, just silence. Rachel didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just looked like something she hadn't expected to see had finally caught up to her. The weight of being seen. Afterward, Kyle approached me outside the courthouse. I didn't do enough. You didn't, I said plainly. But you came. You showed up. He nodded. If you ever want me in your life again, I'll be here. No expectations, I'll earn it. I'm not interested in being earned, I said. Just seen. Fully. No edits. He smiled faintly. Okay, we didn't hug. We didn't plan dinner, but he walked with me to the curb, and that was enough for now. I used to think betrayal came with warning signs, raised voices, slammed doors, but that's not how it happens with people you love. It comes in whispers, in documents you don't read, in nurses who smile too politely, in your daughter's hand over yours, guiding the pen just a little too forcefully. I don't regret surviving it. I regret how long it took me to recognize it. The world is not kind to older women who say they've been hurt. We're expected to smile through it, to be grateful we're still cared for. But care without consent is not love, it's control, and control, dressed up in family obligations, is a slow theft of your name, your choices, your voice. I got mine back, not because I'm brave, but because I got angry at the right time, and someone, a nurse named Lindo, believed me. If you're watching this, and someone's treating you like you're invisible, start writing things down, start listening harder, start asking questions no one wants you to ask. And remember this, blood does not excuse betrayal. Love is proven through freedom, not obedience. You can leave the room they locked you in. You can return as someone they never expected. A version of you who sees every wall clearly. Thank you for staying with me. If this story meant something to you, subscribe to follow the next chapter. There's more than one kind of freedom, and I plan to explore them all.